Messiah. Katie and Magdalena here with our hymn devotion for Sunday, August 30th. This is the last week of our series on Joshua, and we are going to be looking at hymn number 724, On Jordan's Stormy Banks I Stand. So despite its wilderness wanderings, its confrontation with enemies, and its doubts in the Lord, Israel finally reached the promised land. God promised that the land would yield great material blessings for the Israelites and that future generations would prosper there. However, we read this Sunday from Joshua chapter 24 that what makes life in the promised land truly blessed and truly different is that there God demands true worship of Him and rejection of the false gods of this world. Let's read together then from Joshua 24. Now therefore fear the Lord and serve Him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. The journey of Israel out of Egypt and through the wilderness and into the promised land foretells the Christian's journey by faith. We begin in a life of sin. We receive new life in our baptism, where Christ frees us from sin, but we still must travel through this world and through the sufferings and trials of this world until we reach our heavenly home. So the image of the promised land is often taken up in Christian hymnody to describe the Christian life. You may recognize this in a lot of spirituals, especially, but our hymn today also uses this imagery of the promised land. On Jordan's Stormy Banks was originally written in England. At that time, it had 7 stanzas and no refrain. And the original version focused on a vision of heaven that was so perfect that it seemed unattainable. Believers were really viewing it from a distance and couldn't comprehend what it would be like. But when the hymn came to America, it really, people who sang it in America started to associate it more with a realistic portrayal of the Christian's journey through life and arrival not only in temporal paradise after suffering or going through a trial and arriving on the other side with God's help, but then also the Christian's journey to heaven as originally intended. Our sermon series likewise has reflected this reality of the Christian's earthly journey. Joshua's trust in the Lord gives us an example by which we can learn how to be faithful in our daily walk with the Lord. So as I mentioned, one difficult thing about the Christian journey is that we have to view the promise of eternal life with God from a distance. This anticipation is reflected in stanza 1 of our hymn. On Jordan's stormy banks I stand and cast a wistful eye to Canaan's fair and happy land, where my possessions lie. I think it's interesting here that the hymn writer uses the term possessions. Sometimes when we have a very sentimental or romantic view of heaven, we think about a place where all of our earthly desires will be met. We'll have some big mansion with everything that we ever wanted, and life will be perfect by our standards. But we know that many of our earthly desires for possessions are tainted by sins. These sins include covetousness and envy and even jealousy. Thankfully, our hymn writer redirects our thoughts to divine blessings, not earthly blessings that do await us in earthly life. Stanza 2 tells us that we will be completely ruled by God. His governance is holy and right, and because we will be free from sin in heaven, we will be able to abide in His precepts forever. O'er all those wide extended plains shines one eternal day. There God the Son forever reigns and scatters night away. Some lovely light imagery from the book of Revelation as well. In stanza 3, we see that the consequences of sin, such as sickness and death, will be no more because Jesus has defeated them on the cross, and we will live with him in eternal victory over these things in paradise. From stanza 3, no chilling winds or poisonous breath can reach that healthful shore. Sickness and sorrow, pain and death are felt and feared no more. Finally, then, in stanza 4, we read that we will find eternal peace and rest in God. The stresses, anxieties, and restlessness of this life will be calmed by the love of God our Father. When I shall reach that happy place, I'll be forever blessed, for I shall see my Father's face and in his bosom rest. Thanks for taking a look at this hymn with me. If you go on our website, you can find a link to a contemporary version of this hymn, which I really enjoyed listening to, and I hope you do too. We'll see you next week. God's peace.